Everybody, welcome to the How to Podcast series. I have a podcaster with me today, and he's got a great show. Really fun to listen to. Make sure you check it out. We're going to talk about that during our episode. But Stephen Murphy is here with me today, and we're going to be talking about podcasting for the beginners, for those new podcasters listening to the show. We want to encourage you to get past that 7-8 hump in podcast episodes where a lot of podcasters stop. Stephen's here with me today. Stephen, welcome to the How to Podcast series.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's good to be here.
Oh, I love having podcasters on. You sound great. Tell us a little bit right off the top, Stephen, about your podcast. I would love to share that right off the top.
Well, I run a faith-based podcast called The Nook, and that is named after the location where I'm sitting right now. This is just a spot where I have spent many a morning just reading, connecting with God, and I'm a longtime storyteller. And with that, I'm a recent convert to podcasting. I've worked in video production for 35 years, which, interesting side note, I thought all of that information, all of that knowledge would just be a straight convey over to podcasting. It is not. This was like learning a whole new language, a whole new set of technical skills. It's been a fun education. I don't know if I'll ever go back and listen to my first 10 or 12 episodes because I was so green, but those were necessary to get under my belt to learn what I know today. And I'd like to consider myself a lifelong learner, so I will continue to learn about how to do things better. But my show releases every Tuesday. I typically go with guests. Back to my storytelling. I love to talk to people and about what's happened in their lives. And it just makes for really interesting conversations because I think that everybody has a very unique story to tell. And I love bantering about that. I don't go into interviews. I don't even really like to call them interviews. They're discussions because often when I book a guest, I may get an email a day or two before we are scheduled to have our discussion, and they'll ask me, well, can you send me the list of questions? And I always say the same thing. And it's like, I don't have a list of questions that I don't ever want somebody to feel like we're just sawing through a list. It's like I know the topic. They know the topic that we're going to talk about, and everything is going to fall under that umbrella. Just let the discussion guide where things go. That's probably the quick nutshell about things, and plenty to unpack there, I'm sure.
Yeah. And so we kind of glazed by your background with audio video, and we're not talking about setting up a TV to watch a show. We're talking about like loads of gear, convoys of trucks.
Yes.
This is on a bigger scale than most people would imagine. Can you give us a little insight into that part of your story too? Because I found that fascinating.
I strangely tripped into television production in 1988 when I signed up to do training at the local cable company to work in public access TV. And we would shoot high school football games on Friday night, and they would play them back on Saturday morning. And I got bit by a bug. That even in sports television, I learned that there are stories to tell. And I think that's probably where I got bit by that bug. And I kind of kept graduating from that place of education, if you will, did that all volunteer for 3 years, and then actually started picking up little paid gigs here and there. In TV and video production. And then that ultimately led to doing similar work in live events. So if you've ever been to a big event at a hotel where the ballroom is out geared with all kinds of lights and sound equipment, or even on up into big arenas and hockey and basketball places and stuff like that, where there's all kinds of stuff flown into the ceiling and lights, cameras, action, all that. And it's kind of hard to remember that when I didn't do that kind of work.
See, that sounds fascinating to me. I was whenever I go to a show or an event, I'm like looking around to see the people behind the scenes. I want to watch that. Like, yeah, there's stuff on stage, but who's that guy way up in the up in the
Yep.
rafters? How did he get up there? And
Those
what's
are
he
my
doing?
people.
Right? Yeah, I love that. I love that. So
We're an
that's great.
odd bunch.
And the show wouldn't happen though without you guys. So
Correct.
amazing,
And
amazing.
that's the part I love is that when our job is done well, you have no idea that we're there.
That's right. Right. Yeah, it's like the sound man in church when
Yes.
you hear that squeal and everyone in the building turns and looks back to the
Turns
back of the room,
to sneer at him. Yes.
the hands in the air, like, I didn't touch anything, really.
Swear it's not my fault.
Yeah. I know that. That's funny. And one of the best places to catch a concert is right in front of the sound booth.
Oh,
For me,
absolutely.
I stand right there with my back against the wall, and he's right there, or she's right there behind me. The sound is awesome.
Yep.
So
Those
I
people
saw,
are they are wonderfully selfish. They are
right.
mixing that room for themselves first.
I saw Van Halen with Sammy Hagar
Oh,
with,
nice.
and I stood at the soundboard right behind me, and it was the best sound I had ever heard. So,
Yeah, those
anyways,
guys
yeah,
are artists.
right, yeah, it's amazing, and in the video and everything, it's all fit together. It's beautiful. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm on a tangent because I love what you guys do. So that's amazing. So let's talk podcasting. There's a new podcast you're listening. They're here in the room with us, Stephen. They're ready to start their journey of podcasting. They might trip and fall into it, or however they're going to get here, but they're here and they're looking for that starting advice from someone who's done what you're doing. What would be your first beginning advice to that new podcaster on getting going in this?
First and foremost, and this is actually one of those areas that does transfer from what I've done so long, is planning. You cannot plan enough.
Okay.
And an hour's worth of planning will save you many hours downstream of that. Just spitball, write down every idea, even if it seems silly, because it might spark you to think about something else. Know what you want to talk about. If you're going to be a guest-driven show, I call them hit lists. Every time I tend to do shows in series of 4 or 6 or 8 episodes at a time. And if I want to have that many guests on, I start making hit lists of people that I plan on reaching out to. Sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. So if you want 6, try to find 12, because you're going to get some no's and you're going to get some non-responses. I think well, I guess it kind of depends on where you are. It's either a niche. Know where you want to land, because it just will kind of set you up to do good homework. If you're already a podcast consumer, think about the shows you like. Think about the shows you listen to most often. Listen to them with different ears. What is it that you like about that show? Is it the way that they set up their guests? Is it the way that that they work in different segments? I mean, there's so many different. I mean, there's no cookie cutter for podcasting. And you can call that good and you can call that bad. But if you like podcasts, you're going to know what you enjoy about them and figure out how you can make those things work for you. And if it's something you don't know how to do, reach out to people. I think in the podcast community, you'll find a lot of people who just love to have conversations just like this between Dave and I. We are an interesting bunch, and I think we love to talk shop. We love to swap ideas. Everybody's got opinions about microphones and mixers and editing software. There's so many options with all of that kind of stuff, and there are pockets of people that you can find and lean on, and for that matter, just get mentored by via emails and other means and things like that. I will warn you that it is a lot like starting a business. So if you're considering doing a podcast for your business, this will be a goodly amount of education in figuring out just how to do all the things before you even add your business to it. There is a good amount of time commitment. I was joking with Dave before we started recording. It's a lot like getting a puppy in that you have no idea what it's going to take to keep this little puppy podcast going. And Dave already mentioned it. So many, the statistics have shown for years, so many podcasts are orphaned after 7 to 8 episodes. You can find them as you're searching through podcasts in a certain category. I can't tell you how many times I've gone looking for similar podcasts to my own and read a description and say, oh, gosh, that sounds exactly like what I'm doing. And you get in there and you realize the last episode they posted was in 2018.
Yeah.
And I missed them. Don't even know if I could reach anybody there anymore. So it is a good amount of work. There are terms to learn. There are time frames to keep in mind. One of the things the experts will tell you is consistency is key. So if you're committing to a weekly podcast and you want to put out episodes every Tuesday, do it and do all that you can to stay consistent. I still think it's important to take breaks, and you can inform your audience when those things are going to happen. Take a month off, take 6 weeks off, and those are healthy. They're very healthy. And even as much as I enjoy taking breaks, there's still that at least lets me stop the producing side and I can go back to the planning side, which kind of puts you right back at the top of what I started this with. And one of the best things I learned maybe in the first year that I was doing this was don't be thinking about an audience. Think about a community. Think about a group of people that you want to connect with. Don't be concerned with numbers. Very few of us are ever going to give Joe Rogan a run for his money, but be thinking about that group of people that you want to reach out to. And for that matter, folks that are going to be invested, whether that's time, whether that's sales, whatever that looks like. And make sure you've got ways that they can get a hold of you. Always have some kind of means for people to get in touch with you. And I think that's really in any kind of a podcast. If you want to build rapport with any size audience, be reachable. And when people do reach out to you, be diligent to get back with them. Even if it's just a quick, thank you so much for listening. People really do appreciate that. Bank as many episodes as you can. And I know that there are certain podcasts that do very topical, very news, hot topic kind of things. Well, those people typically have staff that are helping them keep track of what is the top story of the day and how you can respond to it. But otherwise, I've got a good friend who's just getting a podcast started. He's hoping to launch at the end of May 2023. And I told him, I said, just start banking episodes no matter what. And he's doing 2 and 3 a day sometimes right now.
Wow.
Because it's just so good that once you start that carousel, it's something you want to be able to keep up with. And it's just nice to have a stockpile of episodes that you continue to draw from, that you're ahead of the game with. It's like, yeah, well, I started and I've got 12 episodes in the bank. Cool. Well, that means you've got your first 3 months of shows if you're going to go weekly. Just constantly be thinking about stuff like that. And gear is a sickness. My wife will attest to that. Mm-hmm. You'll see videos, you'll hear people talking about their gear, and it's awesome. I mean, our capabilities are just flat out amazing that anybody can start a podcast. You get the most minimal of things. If you've got a smartphone, you can do a podcast. Yeah. It's literally that easy. Talking to your phone, record it and upload it. It may not be exactly what you had in mind, but anybody can do that today. So get gear that you're happy with, gear that you know how to use, but don't be obsessed with it. Kind of, let your show grow and then let the gear chase that as opposed to the other side. Because go search the classifieds in big forums about people that are selling podcast gear.
Mm-hmm.
Search that on eBay sometimes, and you'll see packages. I just saw one a couple days ago where it's four mic stands, big mixer. I mean, it was probably all $2,500 when it was, if you had bought it all brand new, and the guy was selling it for 17. So he's taken a loss, and it said tried starting a podcast and it never took off. It's like, I feel for you. I
Mm-hmm.
know you take your lumps. But I think if it's something that you're meant to do, you're going to fall in love with it. And I love this medium. It's still very new to me, and I think that's part of what I love about it, is that it challenges me, that I can't, when I make a video, I can start with a big beautiful picture, a big beautiful view of mountains and trees and a lake and a little bit of music, and you hear birds, and you don't have to say anything because the pictures are saying that. Well,
Yeah.
in this business, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So I'm always just trying to think of adding layers and texture, and what can I add to a show that isn't just two people talking the entire time and stuff like that. So it'll challenge you creatively. But I don't know, Dave, I could babble on
No,
and
I
on
love
about
it.
this kind of stuff.
Okay, so we
Yeah.
talked about, people getting that 7, 8 episode hurdle and then some people stopping. In your view, in relation to your podcast, how do you measure success? Whether it's to keep going and keep pursuing this, like, how do you know you're doing a good job?
That's a great question. And I wish that I had a really solid answer for you, because uh, I get feedback on my show, but I don't get it in droves. And while I've never been that, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to my stats. I check them periodically. Um, I when I started this, I had a conversation with God, and I just said, I want to have good conversations with people somewhere in the midst of their faith journey. And I'm just going to believe that he gets it to the right ears at the right time. And just recently, I got a note from a guy that I used to work in sports television with 10, 15 years ago. Haven't heard from him forever. And I started posting promotional stuff on my LinkedIn page, which I think LinkedIn is such a weird platform that I've never known what to do with.
Mhm.
But I thought, well, it's another avenue with eyeballs and possibilities. So I started posting stuff there last year, and I get a note from an old friend, and he flat out said, he says, I started listening to your podcast about 6 months ago, and he said, it's been life changing. He says, I've never been much of a reader, so it's been hard for me to ever sit down and read the Bible with any kind of consistency. He says, but when you talk about it, it makes me want to know more. And can I call that dollars to donuts? No, but that note will fuel me for 6 more months, just to
Great.
know that that's a guy I hadn't even considered in years. And yet I get a note from him like that. And it's like, well, to me, that's the right ears at the right time. And
Unbelievable.
maybe something similar to that uh, becomes a goal for somebody else. That's awesome. Because I think the metrics are kind of hard. If you put a YouTube video up, you've put a video in their universe. So if that video gets 1,200 views, well, you can pretty much say, yeah, it got 1,200 views because it's clicks in their universe and their stats are in their thing. Podcasts go everywhere, and I still don't know. I mean, people ask me, how many subscribers do you have? I have no idea. And maybe there's a way to dig, and maybe that's important to some people, but it never really has been for me, because it's going to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Stitcher and Google Podcasts. And I mean, there's 12 or 15 that I think are listed on my pod page.
Yeah.
I've never heard of half of them,
Great.
but that's where my show is going. And
Yeah.
I don't know how worth it is to anybody to keep track of all that stuff, but I'm sure there is. It's just not me.
And at the early
Anyway, that's
days of
probably a really
creating,
long answer.
I love it. No, and in the early days of creating a podcast, they were told by people about people who've been doing this for a long time that you need to hone in on your audience. And they talk about avatar or ideal listener or however you want to call that. But you just mentioned that you created your podcast and you're working your way in this direction. And then you get a message from a longtime friend who wasn't even in your mind when you created this podcast, right?
No.
So even though you created for this group over here, you might pull in group over here and they're nothing to do with what you planned. So if you spend all your time planning out the perfect listener for your podcast and never hit record, right? That's the one thing I see
to
too,
me. That's probably half the battle for people, is that somebody who comes up with, or honestly, part of why I started mine was just on the encouragement of a friend. I hadn't even ever thought about it much, and a friend of mine told me, because I've got a YouTube channel. I haven't done much with it in a few years, but he said, "What about starting a podcast?" It was nowhere near anything that I had even thought about. But then I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I probably planned for 3 months before I released my first episode. And that's just because you quickly learn how much you have to learn. And that's why I'm hosted with Buzzsprout, and hosting is another part of the glossary that you have to learn. Buzzsprout is amazing, and I will always brag on them because they just put out tons of material. If you look up Buzzsprout on YouTube, they've got so much stuff for the new podcaster, and they don't care if you're signed up with them or not. It's amazing, and I love that kind of generosity, and that's how they earned my business. Was you helped me more than I can ever say to get started with this crazy life of podcasting. And I will always steer anybody there, because you pick a topic, they've got material on it.
That's a great thing to point out. I love their resources, and they're very giving people, and they care. Anytime I've ever had a question, bang, I'm top of the list. Like it feels so great to have somebody who cares for you and your
their
show.
Customer service is amazing too. Anytime I've ever had a question and reached out to them in email, even on a Sunday afternoon, I will get an answer back in 2 hours. I mean, it's okay. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love it. So our podcast is a puppy. We have to feed it, take care of it. It's going to grow, but it's a long-term commitment. This isn't a weekend, right? So
correct.
What is your long-term plan for your show? Do you have is there an end in sight for your show? Is it a limited series? Are you going to go forever? A lot of podcasters ask about how far do I have to do these episodes?
That probably will come down to every individual. For myself, I don't think I ever set any kind of a goal. I guess I'm just kind of going on the assumption that I'll know when I should be done. And maybe that's just when you flat run out of ideas and you have wrung the thing out for everything to possibly do. But even within saying that, I just think that there's always something that you haven't concocted yet. And I think, I don't know, it's kind of like the yellow car theory. Once you buy a yellow car, all you do is see yellow cars all over the road. And so I think once you kind of get tapped into the mindset of the medium and understand how broad a scale you can think, conjoined with it just comes down to how much you're willing to put into it. That's why I say any idea that you have, write it down. I think that there's just always a new avenue, and maybe I speak with naivete I mean, my show just turned 2 years a couple of months ago. That there's still a newness to me, and I'm still learning, and I'm still trying things, adding more than just a conversation between me and one person. I've had some bands on recently that those have been kind of fun to do. That not only am I getting to talk to the artists, but I'll include some of their music, and then we'll break down. Tell me, man, it's a great song. How did this thing come to life?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Uh, I think that's been a big thing for me to learn, is that don't always think of it as that you've got to write the novel and it has to be done in an hour. It's just conversations between people. You dive in, you kind of get what you feel like is worth turning around and putting out there, and then edit and bring it down even more. Um, there's so many ideas for content that I think you can come up with once you've kind of figured out your lane. And like you just said, I think there's always that opportunity for overspray for that person you never even thought of. It's like, oh, wow, you listen to my show?
Yeah.
That's cool. Right on. Good to have you.
Yeah. Like one of my shows is called Dad Space. It's meant for dads, fathers, men's mental health. And the majority of my audience are female.
Mm-hmm. And I've talked to a couple other podcasters that do the exact same thing. Yeah. And one of them read a letter on the air in his show a few months back. And I loved it. It was from a single mom. And she said that she loves listening to his show because she's raising two boys, and they're like 8 and 10. And I'm like, that, I'm sure that's not who he's planning for, but now he's mindful of it.
Right.
And that to me just helps expand how you're doing what you do.
Yeah. Talk about listener feedback. What does it mean to you when you hear back from somebody who's sends you that letter, for example, or reaches out in some way and says, thank you for that show? What does that do for you as a podcaster?
It's such a bolster because again, I have an opportunity for people to give money towards my show, but I don't rake much at all, if any, there. So I hope it doesn't sound strange to say that's my payoff. And if somebody is just nice and sends me a note that says, oh, I really enjoyed that show you did with so-and-so, I will always respond. And first of all, thank them. And secondly, just, is there one or two things that really stood out to you? Sometimes people are very wordy about what they liked, but then there's also the folks that just say, oh, that was awesome, thanks for that. Then I would love to pick their brains. That if there was something about an episode that really spoke to them, really caused them to rethink something, I would love to. I can't, I don't want to wear them out, but that's why I say that if I can just, if there was just one or two things about that show, what were they? And I just think that's a way to gauge. It's like, okay, sometimes you wonder, how am I doing? I don't know. The comment section doesn't really exist like it does on a YouTube video or, some other forums. So you take what you can get. And like I always say, don't let the criticism go to your heart, and don't let the praise go to your head. There's something in the middle there about what you're doing, measuring the highs and the lows that will help keep you focused, help keep you chipping away at producing better content.
One of the tools added to my website was SpeakPipe, which allows me to collect audio messages from my listeners.
Yep. I know, and then I can use them too.
I can use them in my podcast.
Yeah.
So they actually get to hear their voice on my show. And then I get the feedback back from them, like, I heard myself on your show. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Right? Like, how'd you?
Well, and that's the type of stuff that people love to share too. It's like, oh man, they just check this podcast out. The guy read my email from last week. And you never know who you might hook in something like that. Grassroots, I will always think is the best way to grow. There's so much, you're going to find talk. You're going to find forums about the best way to grow podcasts. They're a dime a dozen. They're absolutely a dime a dozen. There's no magic formula.
Yeah.
There's no 3 perfect points. It's the effort. It's what you do. It's how you do it. And I've got a friend who works at a business to business marketing firm. And she told me something that you can look at as encouraging or daunting, that things that you're doing today, if you have a podcast that's producing today, people that you're reaching, audiences that you're going for, you could be looking as far as 3 years ahead. So that's where, okay, I mean, I just said that I don't check my stats much, but what I have checked lately is that I'm seeing growth, and that's awesome. But it's 2 years in, and I'm thinking, okay, well, that means that 2 years ago I was casting bread upon the water, and I'm starting to see little bits of return. And as I guess I'd like to think that as I get towards that third year mark, that those numbers will continue to rise within that same mindset. As I'm building this thing. It's a long game. It's not a sprint. You keep learning, keep plugging away, keep asking questions.
What are some of the resources that you've used in the past to help you find your place behind the microphone? A person, a course, a book, a podcast?
Oh
Is there
man,
anything that stands out for you?
I think I'm in 3 different podcasting groups on Facebook. Those have been absolutely priceless.
Good.
And most of them, I love that they're closed. So it's not just viewed by anybody. It's people who are looking for that kind of connection. So you get community, place that you can ask questions, share stories. It's like, this isn't working for me. What are you guys doing? And it's amazing how asking one question and you'll get 30 responses that you can kind of sift through and start seeing. Okay. And one of the great things about that is just like, okay, I'm not the only one who just sucks
Mm-hmm.
at that part. So when somebody says, oh man, check out this video that I watched, it really helped me learn how to fine tune my sound. Or, I mean, literally the sky's the limit on the topics that come up in those kind of groups. Continue to brag on Buzzsprout's content on their own
Yep.
website, what they
Yep.
put on YouTube. There are 2 or 3 others whose names are going to escape me right now. Pat something, who puts out tons of content. I mean, literally just go to YouTube and search how to start a podcast.
Yeah.
There's so much content out there. It's hard to sift through sometimes. You may start 15 videos and only finish 3 of them.
Yeah.
When you realize it's like, okay, this isn't exactly what I was looking for. But it takes time. But the stuff is out there. You cannot make the excuse that I couldn't find anything on that topic,
Great.
because it's as expansive as the internet itself.
Being 2 years into this for yourself, you've learned, you've grown, you've tried, you've experimented. Anything you would do completely different today, starting your show right now, that you wouldn't have done 2 years ago had you not learned these lessons?
Well, honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is that because of the warning I already gave, I was so obsessed with gear initially.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I started right out of the chute with, I bought 3 microphones. I bought 3 of everything, thinking that I was going to be having these incredible sit-down interviews with 2 other people across a table, and we were just going to put together all this great content. Well, then a pandemic hits, and to this day, I can probably still count on less than 2 hands how many face-to-face interviews I've done. They've all been online.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got the gear to do more stuff like that, and I will always take it, because there is just a completely different energy sitting across the table from somebody as opposed to a screen.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're all used to this. And for that matter, I mean, this show is international right now. You're in Canada, I'm in the States.
Great. Yeah.
I love the opportunities that those kind of things, I mean, that's amazing. That I'm not just limited to the city where I live and who I can sit down and talk to. But man, good grief, I spent so much money at the beginning on toys that just weren't necessary. And I wish I had held off on that kind of stuff, because I'm not using any of that gear right now.
Well,
I've sold half of it, and I've lost a little money, but that's definitely that's what fuels me saying, get what you can. There's great content out there. And it's like, here's 2 microphones that you can get started with. There are free programs online that'll actually do the recording for you, that where you can edit. I've never worked with Audacity, but I know that that's one that a ton of newbies start with.
Yeah.
There's so many resources at your disposal. You just got to go look for them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. I love that. Yeah, I use Audacity myself, and I've been using it for music production before there was podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of took, you talk about your background and trying to translate that into podcasting. I was able to move that music side into podcasting relatively easily. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that is an advantage. But some people look at that screen and go, I have no idea what you're doing.
Yep.
Right. So there's other tools that are more simplified or easier for you, or
Well, and
something
again,
that works
there's
best for you.
so many tutorials.
Right. Yeah.
You will run out of time before you run out of
Yeah.
videos that will help you. It's like I've got files, I've got my voice and I've got somebody else's voice. How do I even start? There is a video. There are
Yeah.
15 videos that will get you started on something
Yeah.
like that. And
Yeah.
once you start learning, you just get more hungry for it.
So you talked about not giving your guests all the questions in advance. Any other interview tips for a new podcaster thinking of doing interviews?
Yes.
Here we
That's
go.
probably,
Here we go.
oh
He's
man.
getting all set up for this one.
I remember seeing a movie many years ago, and it came to mind as I was pondering this conversation. And within the movie, there was a rodeo element. And I don't know if this is how they still do stuff, but let's just say that in the 80s, that's how they did things for bull riding. A bull rider does his thing for 7 seconds, and a horn blows, and he's done. The judges are giving points for the bull rider, but they're also giving points for the bull. So some bull rider could have had just a flawless ride and he didn't fall off and his form was amazing, but the bull was lethargic. So your mom could have gotten on that bull and ridden it. So they don't rate the bull as high, so the guy doesn't get as good a score.
Oh.
Your ability to talk to people, first and foremost, be conversational. Don't think that you've got to come up with 12 questions. Don't think of things as so rigid. If you want to get somewhere specific, tell your guests that, but don't feel like you just have to make a beeline towards that goal. Get comfortable with people. You may have a fantastic guest and you'll ride on air because it just seems like, man, I just met this guy. I can't tell you how many people I have met because I reached out to them to do an interview for my show. I could call those people right now because we have struck up friendships, and that's awesome. There's other people I talked to once, one, done. And that episode went out and it was cool. It sucks when you have to try to pull the information out of somebody. Some people that just want to give you one word answers. It's a 15-minute interview feels like it's an hour because those things are just rough. And even in those situations, don't ask questions. Tell somebody, hey, you're an amazing author. Talk about how you got into that. You invite them to talk about it. Now that's where their mind goes. And even somebody who maybe isn't that good at interviewing was like, I can tell you exactly how I got into this. Cool. Tell me about it. As opposed to, do you like writing? Yes. Okay, cool. How many years have you been doing that? 7 years. Okay.
Yeah.
It's questions often solicit quick answers. So invite somebody into the conversation as much as you can. You're gonna have amazing rhythm with some people. You're gonna strike up friendships, and other people. I want to say in 2 years of doing this, I have had 2 duds, and those are tough because I've asked somebody to give of their time,
right,
and it just didn't happen. And you get into the edit and it's like, oh, I can't make anything from this. and it's hard. It just I took it very tough. I don't know how my guests did, but it just sucks when you have to email somebody and say, I am so sorry. This conversation just didn't really amount to anything, and so I will not be posting this episode. And I don't even like to make any kind of false promise of, hey, let's try this again someday. It's just like, I appreciate your time, and I wish you the best. Kind of let it be done.
Love it.
Most of the time, you'll be surprised.
Yeah.
It'll work out.
I want to steal your one word answer response. If you ever have a guest who won't let you back into your own podcast, they've locked you out of the apartment.
Oh, yeah.
They've taken over the mic, and you're now a passenger on your own show. If you can get in there and ask them a yes or no question, you can then regain your podcast.
Yes.
So you're going on and on about the thing and all the things and all the things. And you're like, do you like blue apples?
Yeah.
I like blue apples. Now
you have to throw off their rhythm.
I've got the mic back. Right.
Yes.
So they can come in handy if you're ever really desperate. Because I had one gentleman on and his episode never went out. And he openly mocked me during the podcast, inviting me to try to take the mic back because he was the expert and I knew nothing.
Holy cow.
And I'm like, okay, buddy, I just sat for the ride and enjoyed him talk about himself for an hour. That's never come out. And
yeah,
when you do that on my show, no.
Oh yeah. So, and that's you know what? I'm glad you brought that up too, because it's important that you do keep control. I actually I did an interview, and this is one of the fortunate things. This is actually a good friend of mine, and he's been through a lot of stuff, and he's kind of had the scales falling off his eyes, and he's just pleased as punch about new direction in his life. I put 50 cents in that machine, and he didn't stop talking. What I thought was going to be an hour was an hour and a half, and I'm trying to literally hop on a merry-go-round that was going at top speed, and then he had to be done because he had another meeting. It's like, okay. And I emailed him a day or two later, and I said, I'd really like to take another stab at that. We'll call that a good first run. Now I know the high points of your story. Let me lead you through it. And he totally gets it. And it was, those opportunities may not always present themselves, but I was just glad that we got a second stab at that. And the second attempt it just turned out to be a great episode. There was also another time that I had that person, and it was just somebody who has an amazing story, and she has told it so many times in front of audiences that doing it in a conversation, you could tell, just seemed foreign to her. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you're like this, Dave, but when I'm interviewing somebody, I'm already pre-editing in my head. Yeah. It's like, okay, yeah, they felt like that was an important point. I already know that's not going to be in there. Stuff like that, okay, this one she was really not playing along. Well, that was one of those times that, okay, here's one of those things where I'm going to learn. I am going to take her hour and 20-minute discussion with herself, and I'm going to break it down into bite-sized chunks. And I am going to interject myself into post.
Right.
I say, today I'm introducing you to so-and-so, and man, does she have a colored past. Soundbite. Nice. Keep a little music underneath it. Let that thing finish. It's like, and it was at this point that I could not wait to ask her more about her time in Las Vegas. Play nice. 10 minutes of her talking about Las Vegas. I got feedback saying, it was like, that was interesting, but it's just not the way you usually do it. I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. But there was something there that I was willing to put the extra time in, and even just kind of finagle a map that I had never worked with before. And that was kind of one of those things. Is like, I'm still happy with it. I still was able to salvage that. And I was, the lady, she promoted it in her socials. So that gives it a little extra traction. There's just always, it's like plan for 75% and always leave margin to pivot. Always leave margin to go, well, that didn't go exactly how I thought.
You know,
Don't be ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
yeah. And if you have a guest that has their key story they tell in every episode, and you can recite it verbatim because you've heard it 1,000 times in all the other interviews. If you want to avoid them to do that in your show, use their story as their intro.
Yes.
Hey, everyone, I got Steve Murphy on the podcast today. Steve is amazing at audio and video. He's traveled the world. He's done all the things. Welcome to the podcast, Stephen. Now I've just taken your whole story away from you, and now we can start with our conversation.
Right. And you stay at the wheel.
Right.
You absolutely stay at the wheel. But you also bring up another good point. If you're going to have guests, do your homework.
Yeah.
Know why you're having them on. It was the reason that you reached out to them in the first place.
Right.
But then once you've landed them and they have committed, you've got a date on the calendar, watch every video that they've ever been in, go listen to other podcasts that they've been on. If they've got a book out, hit Amazon, see what people are saying about it.
Yeah.
There's a handful of authors that I've had on. It was a topic that I was already interested in anyway. And read their book. You can find them cheap on eBay. Don't pay full price, but if it's a book that's been out for a while, buy a used copy and at least read the first 3 or 4 chapters.
Yeah.
They love to talk about their books. They love to talk about their stuff. And when you sound like you know what you're talking about, they respect it. And I think it gives them that much more reason to jump in with you, because you're not just, I don't know, every one of us has seen the junkets when, oh, all right, joining me today is a big time movie star and you got a new movie coming out. Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Wow, that must have been amazing shooting in Nigeria. Did you enjoy that? It's boring as a box of rocks.
Yeah.
learn your people, learn your guests, know what makes them tick. I think you'll be very pleased with how well they respond when you can show that you've done your homework and they're not just another guest.
Protect your audience like a goalie in sports. Protect that net. I've had people come through and they want access to my audience and they are not interested in my podcast as a guest. They're interested in my audience. And I'm like, no.
Mm-hmm. Are you on Podmatch by chance, Dave?
No.
Don't. I'll tell you. Okay, there's a tip for you audience folks. Tread softly. There's a service out there called Podmatch. Doesn't cost anything, but you can list your show and list the type of guests that you're looking for. And there's a lot of check boxes to go through, and then you put your availability and how you typically do interviews and that kind of a thing. And my gosh, I hate to sound snobby, but the only people I ever seem to hear from is, hey, I just wrote a new book and I think your audience would love to hear about it. You've never listened to my show. I can tell by your copy and paste ask. You've never listened to my show. Otherwise, you would have known that that's not the type of material I'm looking for. That's not a topic that would ever bounce. And maybe that's a little bit presumptuous earlier on, but if anybody takes any kind of a gander through my 100+ shows now, you can draw an aggregate, and your book on, better organizing in the kitchen, there's no place for that here. Why would you even ask?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, that's one of those. I think I may have actually converted 1 or 2 of those people who have reached out to me through Podmatch into guests, but otherwise it's just like, hey, you got a match from such and such, and it's just like a weird dating service. And you read their thing and no, it's gonna be a hard pass. Good luck with your next one.
The key to being a great guest is to bring content. Help your hosts listen to their shows and go, hey, you haven't talked about this part of your podcast. You haven't gone into this episode or this type of topic. I'm an expert on this topic, and I enjoyed episode 5, episode 6 when you had this person on and you did that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm listening. I'm part of your community, and I think
that's
I can
help
homework. You in this content part that I haven't seen you talk about yet. I'd love to come on and help, and I'd love to help your community.
Yep,
great. That's awesome.
And you just reminded me of one more thing. Well, first, how's this? First of all, when you get a guest on, ask them if they've got a time constraint. And if they do, do
Okay.
everything you can. If they give you a half an hour, wrap up that interview in 25 minutes.
Yep.
And if they say they've got all kinds of time, still try to keep it under an hour.
Yep.
Respect their time. Keep an eye on the clock. That stuff is just so critical. And even if you didn't get through everything you thought you were going to talk about, it's back to what I was just saying about the 75-25. 99% of the time, I will just say to a guest, first of all, thank you for doing my show. I know I'm going to edit that out, and I'll say it's a boilerplate speech. I always like to leave some time at the end. If there's something that you thought we were going to talk about and we didn't, or something else has just come to mind while we have been talking, you've got all the time that you'd like right now to say it. Most folks will absolutely have, one more quick thing is this, and it'll just be gold because it's wheelhouse stuff for them. I can only think of one or two people that would just go, no, I think I'm good. And okay, then throw up all over yourself, thanking them for taking the time. Tell them you're excited to get the content out. Just always leave that guest feeling like they were the hero on your show.
Stephen, you're my hero. I want
Thanks,
you to know
bro.
you just did what you just said. You just did it. And I'm a student humbly at your feet because that was well placed and well said. Thank you.
No, thank you. This was an absolute honor to do. When you first reached out, it was like, okay, there was no question. This has to happen.
Mm-hmm. I love having you here. Stephen, tell us again where everyone can find you. And I've had you for a long time here, and I appreciate your time. Where do people connect? What do we do?
The easiest way is just look up the Nook podcast. I'm pretty much there is another Nook, but it's one of those shows that's been orphaned. It was actually a show about books. More power to them, but I want to say that it's been close to 5 years since they've posted anything. But my show is called The Nook Podcast. The subtext is real faith in real time. It's a blue logo. You can't miss it. And in every show, I've got information in the show notes to, links to my socials, ways to get a hold of me, that kind of stuff. It's all there.
Awesome. It's great. Thank you so much, Stephen, for your time. Thank you for being a part of this. Sir. And I'd love to keep the door open, the crack open just a little bit. And then anytime you wanted to come back and chat again, I would love to have you back. Absolutely.
I always want to be that type that I mentioned, that I love helping people get started in this fun little world of podcasting.
Excellent. And it shows. Thank you for being part of this.
Certainly.
Hey, thanks for being here on the How to Podcast series. Glad to have you on the show with us, listening in. I hope they're finding value in the podcast. I hope they're finding something that helps you with your show, helps you with the tools and the information from these amazing guest co-hosts through our daily Daves and these solo episodes. The variety of what we're doing here on the podcast is all designed for you so that you can get the tools you need to create your podcast and keep going with your show. That's why we're here. That's why I'm doing this. And I'm glad you're here finding value in this. If you would like to do a little bit more than just be a listener, if you want to do community with podcasters, we have a thing called our Meetup on meetup.com. You can come find us, and there'll be a link on our website at howtopodcast.ca, and you can come and join in on our Meetup. Instead of just being a listener, you could actually participate and come in and join other podcasters, just like you, at your stage, at your level, where you're at right now. And then other podcasters who are maybe a little further down the road, who can learn from you and you can learn from them. And we host these meetups on a regular basis. Again, go to howtopodcast.ca and you'll find all the information there. We'd love for you to come join us at our next meetup. The only thing we need at our next meetup is you. You're the only thing missing from all of this. So consider joining our meetups. Again, they're totally free on a regular basis, all through howtopodcast.ca. And I'd love to hear more from you about your podcast as well. There's a SpeakPipe link on howtopodcast.ca. Leave a message. I'd love to hear about you and your show and how we can work together to get your message into the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for sharing the show with another podcaster that you're like, hey, I think you'd really like this episode. Go ahead, share the episode, and let's get more podcasters on the mic. Thanks for listening.